We humans love to put a value on things. Take my water bottle, £10, or my car, £10,000. And as we go around our daily lives, our busy brains are forever calculating, thinking, what's the value of this? Is it a good deal? And I think if I gave you a selection of everyday objects, you'd be able to put them on a scale somewhere between water bottle and car. And you might not all choose the same value or the same order, but you'd all have a view. So my question for you today is, where would you put plants? Maybe somewhere in the middle, between water bottle and car? That's quite a broad range. If I think about the price I pay for plants in a garden centre, probably closer down towards the water bottle in that lower half of our scale. But I have to confess, I really like plants. I've lived in a city all my life, and I love living in a city. But the one thing I really miss is that connection to nature, that vibrant feeling of life that you can't replace with anything else. So I have an emotional value I attach to plants as well. They make me happy. So I might shuffle them a bit further up the scale of value. But then I found out something that completely flipped my idea of the value of plants on its head. What if I told you that the plants in my little front garden are worth way more than my car parked right next to them? Does that sound weird to you? Birmingham City Council recently calculated that for every £1 they spend on the parks and green spaces, they get £24 worth of value back. 24-to-1 return on investment. That is spectacular. That is particularly brilliant for me because I sell plants. I work on a commercial nursery, and I've spent the last decade or so developing systems for getting plants back into cities where they're so scarce. Up on rooftops, going up walls, in strange nooks and crannies where you might not be expecting them. And so I thought I was pretty good at explaining the value of plants to people, because that's my job. And I was blown away by this figure. So if I'm going to convince all of you that the plants on a roundabout outside are worth more than the cars driving around them, we're going to have to dig a little deeper. And I invite you to join me on a journey through 3 lovely locations as we unpick a little bit more what it means to value something. And this is our first stop. And I want you to note what your first reaction is to this scene. Have a look, think of it in your head. And now, please, raise your hands if your first reaction to this scene is, oh, that's pretty, or that's vibrant, or calming, any kind of positive emotional reaction. I can't quite count you, but I can see there's quite a forest of hands, so probably over half of people from what I can see. Super, thank you very much. Now, please raise your hands if your first reaction to this photo was, what a fantastic floodwater management system. No hands. Don't worry, that's normal. Because we tend to switch off our calculating brains when we're somewhere beautiful and in nature. And that's a good thing. Please continue to do that when you're out enjoying nature. But just for this once, indulge me and start those calculating brains going and think, how much water do you think is held in this lake and absorbed by all the surrounding greenery? And now what would happen to that water if the park were not there? it would be flooding all the neighbourhoods around. And that would start to accumulate costs. Environment agency, insurance companies, travel chaos, business disruption, and health costs from all those long-term impacts on the people affected long after it's gone from the news. And suddenly we've got quite a hefty bill. And that bill is being prevented. We're not having to pay that because this park is there. And so suddenly you can see one component of that 24-to-1 return on investment figure is saving us from having to pay out these things. And if you're not convinced yet, have a look at this. This is a rain garden. This is us ripping up asphalt, tearing up concrete, and putting plants in there. Specifically to take water off the road and prevent all of those costs we were just looking at. And this isn't doing quite the same job as that huge lake and park. And it's not actually natural. This is using nature and using plants as an engineering solution. And this is not a cheap neighbourhood. I want you to start calculating now, how much do you think this local council would be earning if they had put a parking meter there? Because I reckon you could park at least one car in this space. How much would they be earning from that parking meter? Not as much as they're getting from putting plants there, clearly. And I invite you to think, next time it rains, which won't be too long, and you see those rivers of water trickling down your street, or you're sidling around the edge of a puddle, how much of that water might have been absorbed if there were a little bit more street planting? On to our next step, and I'm afraid we might have to part company for a second, because I want you to find somewhere that is special to you. Somewhere outside in a green space or watery space, somewhere in nature that you love. Maybe somewhere you look forward to at a particular time of year, or somewhere you keep going back to on holiday on your travels. And if it helps, close your eyes to imagine yourself there. What can you feel beneath your feet? What can you smell? What can you hear? Is there any twittering or rustling or humming? Now can you start to imagine how many other creatures you are sharing this space with? Whether you can hear them or see them, or all those huge communities of creatures we don't even know the names of wriggling around in the soil under our feet. As you're starting to gently calculate these numbers again, I'm going to introduce you to my special place, because there's this one oak tree I particularly love that I pass every day going to work. And it's silhouetted against the skyline, looking majestic. And I love it because it's beautiful. But then I found out that an oak tree will support over 2,000 different species. And that's not counting all the fungi and bacteria. Those are things we can see and count. And if we just pick one of those, a small, colourful, easy to recognise bird called the blue tit. This blue tit will be feeding on the berries and the nuts from my tree, and all the different berries and nuts from the different local trees. If there are trees in your space and it's nearby, it'll be visiting those too. It's also eating the caterpillars and the insects, which themselves are depending on this tree. And as it flies around a neighbourhood, possibly visiting and using rural spaces in different ways, it'll be visiting your local allotment. It'll be eating the little caterpillars that are eating your cabbages and your lettuces. So it's increasing our harvest. And with this huge complex web of feeding and life, we are depending on these creatures for our own food. And how do you think we measure the value of this? Are these creatures important in their own right, and we have a moral duty to look after them? Or are they important because they are the building blocks of life and a system that we depend on for food and resources? Either way, it's quite tricky to measure. We can count species, but it's tricky to measure because it's life. So let's move on to our third stop. And we're going into work, into a city centre office block. And there's a rain garden, so it's saving us lots of money on flooding. And there's a beautiful kaleidoscope of rainbow-coloured flowers, buzzing with life. How lovely. But I need to focus because I have a difficult morning coming up. I have a nightmare meeting with a client, and I come out to thousands of emails, and then I have a showdown with my colleague, which was really unnecessary. And by the time I get to my lunch break, I can feel the heat rising up behind my eyes and the pressure, and I just escape outside. I walk up and down through the plants, take some deep breaths, get my hair back to normal. And by the time I go back into the office, I can focus, I can deal with my problems, I can do my job better. And someone started to measure this. They're coming up with figures like 30% reduction in sick days from being around plants, 15% increase in productivity from being around plants. And once you add up all these physical and mental health benefits, huge cost savings for the NHS, brought to you by plants. But for me, it's just made a horrible day more bearable. And by the time I get home, I feel like I can be a nicer person to my family. I can be present for them. I'm not entirely sure if they've measured that. But as we conclude our journey, I think we need to go back to our value scale. We have the £10 water bottle. We have the £10,000 car. And useful though my car is, it's not saving money from flooding. It's not supporting life. And it's not making me healthier. So I'm fairly happy that arrangement of plants in most circumstances in my neighbourhood is going to be worth a huge amount more than my car now. And there are actually tools to measure this. So I'm actually now worried that my slide is not wide enough because my magnificent beast of an oak tree is going to be worth at least 5 times the value of my car, if not more. But we need to add on all those extra values, that huge web of life that we can't quite measure, that you may even feel is more important than all those elements that we can measure. So if we can think of these 2 types of value, then we can harness the power of plants to make our neighbourhoods, our workspaces, and our lives better. So if you're looking for the best return on investment for your business, your family, and generations to come, support plants in any way you can.